So we know where pricing power comes from. What's it going to do? Right? What does it matter that we have pricing power? We're probably not going to get all the way through this today, but we will get started and then we will continue next time. So we want to have a model of what a firm with pricing power is going to do. How are they going to behave? What choices are they going to make? And so we're going to basically start with the competitive market model that we already have. We already know how to work with that. And we're going to expand it a little bit to just allow for some pricing power. So we're going to see how an individual firm behaves when they have pricing power as opposed to when they don't. And that's really the only change that we're going to make to the model. So we're going to be able to use a lot of the stuff that we already know from before. So we're going to assume that firms with pricing power want to maximize their profits. That is the same goal that we had last time. The only difference is that they have the ability to influence the price. They can choose a high price and a low quantity, or a low quantity and a high price. Which means they face an individual downward sloping demand curve. This is really the only change that we are making to our competitive market model. Remember, before our competitive market model had a completely flat demand curve, we are going to tilt that demand curve, and everything else is going to come out of that. So just like before, we have our marginal cost. We have our average cost, which still intersects at the bottom. And we're going to add in our demand curve. And this demand curve is going to slope downwards. All right, so we've made our one change. Let's see what implications we can get out of this. So something that's going to happen here is that, remember before, we had that this curve, the demand curve, also represented the price. And that's true, but it's not going to represent our marginal revenue anymore. So before, we had this idea of total revenue, right? So total revenue is price times quantity, right? How much money you're bringing in. Total revenue equals price times quantity. That's still true. However, now when we increase quantity, when we sell another unit, it's not quite as simple as just getting paid the price. Because what does it take for us to sell another unit? Well, whatever amount we were selling before, if you look at the demand curve, let's ignore profit maximizing, let's just say what do we sell? Let's say we're selling this amount right here. Let's say Q1. Follow that up, how much can we sell that quantity for? Well, we ask the demand curve, we say, hey, what are you willing to pay for this quantity? And that would give us a number. Let's say this is 40. We're willing to pay 40 if you want us to buy that. Now, as the person with pricing power, I'm trading off price and quantity. I can sell more stuff, but I got to lower the price to do it because I'm already charging as much as I possibly can to sell this much. Nobody's willing to buy any more at this high price. If I want to sell more, I got to lower the price. So if I want to go up to Q2, I have to lower the price. Let's say this is 38. Let's think about what this means for our marginal revenue. How much additional money are we bringing in by selling another unit of the good? Well, here's our new price at this new quantity, 38. But to get here, we sold a unit for 38, great. But we also had to lower the price on all these other units. So we're getting some money, right? Because we're selling more units at a certain price. We're bringing in more money from that. But we're also losing money from reducing the price on all our other stuff, right? The units that we would have sold at a higher price, right? So I'm not getting as much out of these people as I could, but I am selling to more people, right? Lower prices, broader base, as we increase the quantity. So when the quantity increases, revenue increases because the quantity's gone up, but it decreases because the price has to go down. And so I'm making less money on each unit, even though I'm selling more units. So how much additional revenue am I going to bring in? I'm going to bring in less than the price, right? I sell one more unit, I get paid the price. Great, went up by the price. But I lowered the price than everybody else, I lose some money. So whatever I start with the price, I'm not making quite as much as that. So my marginal revenue is going to be less than the price. So bringing that over here to our graph, I'm going to have a separate line for marginal revenue that wasn't there before. So before we got away with three curves on the graph, now we're going to have 4 curves. We're going to add a marginal revenue curve. It's going to be below demand. It's going to slope down more quickly. Technically, because this is a straight line, It should have twice the slope, but I'm not going to like measure your slopes or whatever. But the important thing is marginal revenue is always below the demand curve. It's always below the price, and it slopes down more quickly. Okay, so we've got our graph, we've got our curves. What can we do with these curves? So we want to do the exact same thing that we did with competitive market firm, which is maximize profit. So we can do this by following the golden rule. We want marginal benefit to equal marginal cost. So if we're trying to maximize profit, we want marginal revenue to equal marginal cost. Okay, that's our goal. We want marginal revenue equal marginal cost. This is already going to give us a hint as to how we can find our maximum profit on our graph. It also tells us something else. Because price is above marginal revenue, that means the price is also going to be above marginal cost, which means that we're not going to get an efficient outcome, right? Where's the efficient outcome? Well, it would be where the consumer's marginal benefit, represented by the price, is equal to the marginal cost, but those are not equal. So we're not going to get efficiency. That's going to give us a hint. We'll see it a bit more in detail on the graph in a second. The firm is going to end up underproducing. They're not going to produce enough to get to the efficient point. So we're going to have a deadweight loss on this graph. Let's actually put this on our graph. So we have our marginal cost, average cost, and demand, and the marginal revenue. We're already where we are on the whole. Okay, so now let's figure out how to maximize our profit. So we're going to follow 4 steps. We followed 3 steps last time to maximize competitive firm. We're just going to add 1 more step. That's all we've got to do. Step number 1, set marginal revenue equal to marginal cost. This is going to give us our quantity. I'm going to call it QM for monopoly quantity. Let's do that on our graph. Here's our marginal revenue, not demand. Here's our marginal revenue. Here's our marginal cost. We look for where they intersect. Right there. That is going to give us our quantity QM. Now, here's the additional step that we didn't have last time. Last time, we didn't need to figure out the price because the price was just given to us, right? But now we got to figure out the price. We need to figure out, okay, what's the quantity that we want to set, and also what price are we going to sell it at, right? Because we get to control both of those things now. We didn't get to control the price before, but now we do get to control the price. So what price are we going to set? Well, we can say, hey, consumers, I know I want to sell this many units. What are you willing to pay for this many units? Right? So I'm going to ask the demand curve. I'm going to say, hey, demand curve, what are you willing to pay? We got to ask the demand curve, which means we're going to take this quantity and we're going to plug it in to the demand curve. And wherever the quantity intersects with demand, that is going to tell us how much they are willing to pay. In other words, what price we will set. So the quantity comes from following the golden rule, as always. And then the price comes from asking the demand curve, hey, what price can I charge you in order to make me follow the golden rule? We're going to plug quantity into demand, and this is going to give us our price. Now we have quantity and price. There's 2 more steps, but they're exactly the same as we used to do with competitive market. There's really no changes at this point. So we're going to find out what the profit is. In order to do that, we got step number 3, plug quantity into average cost. That's going to give us our average cost as a number. And then finally, profit is quantity times price minus average cost. We do this on our graph. There's no differences here to how we used to do this with competitive firm. Here's our quantity. We plug it into average cost. Follow that over. As always, we should get a little cup here down at the bottom where it goes above that line. There's no use for this point where marginal cost and average cost cross. It's the bad spot, the tempting spot that we must avoid. It's wrong. So now we have our price, we have our average cost, we have our quantity, profit as a box. We have written our box with all 4 corners here. We can fill it in. Go all the way to the corner, and that is our profit. Do the exact same thing, but we'll use some numbers this time. I'll copy this down, we'll do this on the board. So we got marginal cost is 2Q, Average cost is 100 over Q plus Q. Demand is price 100 minus Q. D. Marginal revenue is 100 minus 2. Something to notice, by the way, is that the marginal revenue is just the demand curve and I double the slope. As long as it's a straight line, that'll work. Because if you work out the calculus, that's just what you get. Right? Multiply price times quantity, end up with a Q squared. The 2 comes down, take the derivative. Easy as that. All right, so we have our curves. We're going to follow our steps just as we did on the graph. I'm going to draw out the graph again just so we can follow along with those again. Okay, so step 1, set marginal revenue equal to marginal cost. This will give us our quantity. We got marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Marginal revenue is 100 minus 2Q. Marginal cost is 2Q. 100 equals 4Q. Divide by 4, we get 25 for Q. Over on our graph, we find where marginal cost and marginal revenue cross. Right here. Follow that down. That's going to give us our quantity of 25. All right, step 2. We've got our quantity. We want to find our price. So we're going to say, hey, I want to sell 25 units. Consumers, what are you willing to pay for 25 units? Right? What's the most that you're willing to pay? I'm going to take every penny that I possibly can out of you. I'm going to charge as much as I possibly can based on the demand curve. So we're going to take our quantity and plug it into demand. So we got our demand curve, which is price equals 100 minus Q. Our quantity is 25. So we get price equals 100 minus 25 or 75. Back on the graph, we're taking our quantity. We're going to ask the demand curve, hey, demand curve, what are you willing to pay? That's where we find the answer, where the quantity intersects with demand. Follow it over, we get 75. All right, step 3. We want to plug in. Now we want to find our profit. So what are the elements of profit? Well, we need price, quantity, and average cost. We have price and quantity. Now we just need average cost. So we can plug our quantity into our average cost function to get average cost. We have average cost is 100 over Q plus Q. Our quantity is 25, so we get average cost is 100 over 25 plus 25, which is 4 plus 25, or 29. Find this on our graph by taking quantity and plugging it into average cost. Plug things in by finding where they intersect. We take our 25, we do, follow it till we get average cost. There it is. There's our average cost of 29. Finally, we can calculate our profit. Step 4, which is just calculate our profit. Profit is quantity times price minus average cost. Our quantity is 25. Our price is 75. Our average cost is 29. 25 times, what is that, 46. 25 times 46, 1150. On our graph, we're drawing out the same box. We go from 0, quantity of 25. We go from our price down to average cost from 75 to 29. That's our profit. You can fill in the entire box. And that is our profit. Any questions about this so far? All right. There's one thing I want to add before we go, and that is the deadweight law. So I mentioned that we're not going to be producing the efficient quantity. And so let me show you what that is, and then you put that on our graph as well. I'm not going to have you actually calculate out deadweight loss in this class, but it's not too difficult. It's just a triangle. So first of all, what is the efficient quantity? Any guesses as to what 2 lines I want to intersect to find the efficient quantity? You got it, demand and marginal cost, right? Because demand curve represents the marginal benefit to the consumer, right? That is society's marginal benefit. And the marginal cost is the marginal cost of production for the producer. So that is society's marginal cost. When those two things intersect, we get the efficient quantity, which of course is higher than the actual quantity that we will produce, right? The person with pricing power is going to make more profit by choosing to produce a little bit less than the efficient amount, but charging everybody a little bit more. Right? Not necessarily charging a massive amount, we don't necessarily know that, but more than would be the efficient amount. So there's our efficient quantity. Here's our actual quantity. The deadweight loss is always going to be the surplus that we could have had but don't. So what's really the problem here? The problem is that there are these units right here from here to here, the 25th through whatever this is, right? And we can figure out what that optimal quantity is by just solving demand with marginal cost. So we got marginal cost is 2Q. We want to set that and solve that with demand, which is 100 minus QD. That gives us 3Q equals 100, or optimal quantity is 33 1/3. We got 33 1/3. So there are roughly 8 units that would be so that people value more than it would cost the producer to make, but are not getting sold because the producer would rather charge everybody else more than sell units to everybody. Okay. So over these units, if these units were sold, it would produce this much in benefit following along the demand curve. It would incur this much in costs following along the marginal cost line. And so the area between them, that is the surplus we could have had, but no longer do. That is our dead weight loss input. As always, it's over the units that either should or should not have been purchased. In this case, should have been purchased but weren't. And it's between the benefits that would have occurred and the costs that would have occurred, which is that triangle.